This is Linguistics 5901, Introduction to Historical Linguistics. If you are supposed to be somewhere else, you can exit now or stay, actually. Maybe you'll find it interesting. I'm Brian Joseph. I will be your instructor for the term. I'm going to talk a bit about the course and the course content before we get into... The first day is often just going over syllabus and so forth, and I don't like wasting a first day, as it were. So I have things I want to tell you about historical linguistics and about the tie into the overall content of the course, and then at some point, if there's enough time, we'll turn to the syllabus and we'll get sort of the mechanical overview of what's going on in the class. But let me start by talking about this building. And actually, let me power on. And see if we can do it this way. Because what building are we in right now? Smith Lab, right? You know that? And we can in 20 seconds, oh, very good, less than 20 seconds. Oops. This is sort of a representation of the building that we're in, right? More or less. What about this? Same building, actually. Does it extend as far? So the part that we're in right now, the part of this building, was not part of the building that you see here, and yet it's Smith Labs. We can even go a bit further. And, oh no, this is, I was looking for there's one where it's under construction. Yeah, here we go. So, is this Smith Labs? Or is it sort of a proto-Smith Labs? Smith Labs in statu nascendi, the state of coming into being. I mention this because, to a certain extent, we have continuity in that this plot of land has had walls and beams and cinder blocks and whatnot that constitute Smith Lab in some state or other for some 50 years or so. This is as it was coming into being. This is its sort of more conventionalized view now. Nicer weather. There are things at Smith Lab that constitute part of Smith Labs on the inside. I don't know whether you walked along the east corridor there, but there's this wonderful new student space for you guys to go and study and so forth if you're not distracted by all the interesting architecture and such. So what we have is continuity in that there's an entity, Smith Labs, that has existed here for some 50 years or so in one form or another, but at the same time there's also evidence of change in what constitutes, quote, Smith Labs. And I mention this by way of introducing something that will really be the key to what we're doing in this class. We'll be looking at continuity and change over time. That's what these pictures show us here for Smith Lab, with regard to language, specific languages, language in general, and trying to draw out of that some sense of what it is that changes when language changes. How do these changes take place? And we know with regard to a building that someone decides to build a building, they dig, and then they pour a foundation, and they put up metal iron girders and so forth, and cinder blocks and whatnot before you know it, you have a building. Does language work that way? We'll see. Okay, so that's a little bit, but there are actually some more interesting things to say about other buildings on campus that tie into historical linguistics in maybe surprising ways. I'm going to power this off, but you can make it go black. That's what because we'll come back to this in a bit. But, I don't know if any of you looked at the class schedule, say back in November. Do you know what building we were assigned to originally for this class? Anyone? It was Enerson. And what's the full name of Enerson? Enerson, something in classroom building, right? Yeah. And I decided to move here because I really hate Enerson. It was a small room that would have had, it was supposed to hold 24 people, and it would hold 24 people, but in the wintertime, especially, even though this is called spring semester, this is the wintertime, people have coats and bags and boots and whatnot, and this room actually gets very crowded. And I like a bit of room to move. You'll see me moving around across the front from back and forth and so forth. And I just felt constrained there, and I thought this is nice and look, it has all these windows and such. So we're here now, but what is the, has anyone been here long enough to know what Enerson used to be called? Central Classroom Building. So Central Classroom. And buildings at OSU have abbreviations. What was the abbreviation for Central Classroom? Do you remember? What would the obvious abbreviation be? CC, yes, good. So it was CC. Now in Enerson, what is the abbreviation for Enerson? Now, anyone know? Anyone want to guess? It's EC. Looks right, Enerson Classroom Building. But there was a period of time, there was a couple years, where the naming of the building was changed, but the old label, the old abbreviation of CC remained for a year or two. And most of the, if you look at most of the, well, we can see here that in a sense then there's been a change from Central Classroom to EC. What do you think motivated the change? Yeah?
It got confusing.
It got confusing. Why?
Because it didn't match.
Because it didn't match. So most of the abbreviations, or in principle an abbreviation, should be like a little signal for, oh, this is what the longer form is. So I think Oxley Hall, where the linguistics department used to be, was OX. Well, there's only one OX on campus anywhere, so that one was relatively straightforward. But here, in a sense, at the point where, if you think of this as like one semantic unit, Enerson Classroom Building, the change in one aspect of the form of expressing that meaning of Enerson Classroom Building, the building that's over there with all the classrooms and whatnot, this aspect of the form changed, but this aspect of the form didn't change. And in a sense, this change here, subsequent change, because there was a year, maybe two, where CC was the official abbreviation for Enerson Classroom Building. So this part of the, if you want to think of the meaning or the expression of the meaning of the building as being the name and the abbreviation, this part changed, but this part lagged behind. And I mention this because we will see in instances where, in language, where some change takes place that seems to disrupt an otherwise regular or seemingly regular system. There was some regularity here in naming, in using CC for Central Classroom, changed the name of Enerson of Central Classroom to Enerson, and oops, we now have a mismatch between the abbreviation and the official name. This is just a very small kind of issue, but it shows that there can be, it's relevant here because it shows that there can be changes that disrupt a system. And what did the system do ultimately by changing the abbreviation to EC?
Corrected itself.
in a sense, it corrected itself. Now, there was probably some bureaucrat who did the correcting, and someone realized, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, and so forth. But if we think of it as sort of a system, we see that the system kind of evens things out and returns to a more rational kind of relationship between official name and abbreviation. And we will see the same kind of thing in language change. So it's useful to keep track of it. In a sense, what these examples about Smith Labs and about Enerson allow us to do is to look at this from two different perspectives. And these are perspectives that we will emphasize again and again throughout this class. One of them is looking at what happens across time. Central Classroom as a name changes into Enerson as a name. The building remained the same, so the meaning was the same, but the label for it changed. Smith Labs, again, we looked at all these different stages of its emergence as a building. We actually have a technical term that we use for looking at things across time like this, and that is, I'll write it like this because to emphasize that it's going across time. That's supposed to read diachrony. Diachrony. And that, hello? There are a few things here and there. You'll find one. So this is diachrony. Does anyone know what the pieces of diachrony are? Well, the chron part. Time. Good. All right. So that's the time. And the dia actually means through. So what we've been in looking at the history, as it were, of these buildings, and looking at things like the change of Central Classroom as a name to Enerson Classroom as a name. We're really looking at the diachrony of some aspect of campus life. Another way, the other sort of contrasting kind of perspective that we can take on things is what is referred to as synchronic. Anyone know what synchronic means? Yeah.
At one point in time?
Yeah, at one point in time. The chron part is, again, our time word. And the syn means with, so it's with time. You allow for a bit of semantic wiggle room, and you get synchronic meaning at some particular point in time. So we can look at Enerson Classroom Building as a name, the abbreviation CC, which persisted for a year or two, as that was associated with that, and think from a synchronic point of view, it's hard to make sense of why CC should have been the abbreviation for Enerson Classroom Building. From a diachronic point of view, once we understand that the name had changed, it makes sense. And so throughout this class, we will, in a sense, be contrasting these two perspectives. They aren't really, they're different perspectives on the same set of events. In a sense, synchronic is looking at the end point of some particular event, and diachrony is looking at the sequence of events that give that particular diachrony. These are very important concepts. They'll come up again. And, I'm sorry, synchronic perspective, synchrony would be at some time, a particular slice of time. Diachrony would be a series of slices of time. We will come back to this relationship between synchrony and diachrony in other sort of areas of this class. So this idea of a mismatch, in this case between the name and the abbreviation, synchronic mismatch, and actually then a later synchronic matching up again, sort of, as someone said, kind of evening out the system. There's I'll show you a clip of something that's kind of, I hope, amusing. Let's see. That makes the same point. Okay. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I don't use this stuff very much. There we go. Okay, but I have And this was courtesy of my son, my older son, David, who brought it to my attention. This is from the movie Basketball. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but when we were talking about this, he said, "Oh, that's just like basketball." So listen up. I want to allow, I think. And let's see if this works.
The hired guns of the Old West.
Wait a minute. Sound is too low, right? Sound, volume controls.
After playing for New England, San Diego.
Okay, I'm going to start it over. This is I don't remember the plot or anything, but this is I think a football player talking about a new team that he has joined.
Much like the hired guns of the Old West. And after playing for New England, San Diego, Houston, St. Louis, a year for the Toronto Argonauts, plus 1 season as a greeter at the Desert Inn, I'm happy to finally play here in the fine city of Miami.
Minnesota.
Whatever. Shit.
Soon it was commonplace for entire teams to change cities in search of greater profits. The Minneapolis Lakers moved to Los Angeles, where there are no lakes. The Oilers moved to Tennessee, where there is no oil. The Jazz moved to Salt Lake City, where they don't allow music. The Oakland Raiders moved to LA and then back to Oakland. No one in Los Angeles seemed to notice. The search for greener pastures went on unabated. Continued expansion diluted the talent pool.
Okay, that's enough. It gets a bit raunchy after that. Sorry, I'm not, I have to be, I should have put a trigger warning or something, but anyway. What was the point of showing you that? What did they say about the Lakers? Who were originally the Minneapolis Lakers. What did they say about Minneapolis Lakers? Becoming the LA Lakers.
They moved where there are no lakes.
They moved where there are no lakes. So how does that relate to what I was saying about Anderson Classroom Building and the abbreviation? Anyone see the connection? Yeah.
It highlights that like mismatch.
Yeah, and because when they were in Minneapolis, the name Minneapolis Lakers made sense because there are lakes all over the place, right? What is the slogan for Minnesota? Isn't it the land of 10,000 lakes? I think so. Yeah. And if you've ever driven through Minnesota, they're right. I mean, I haven't counted them all, but there are lots of lakes there. But when they moved to LA, so this part changed, but the Lakers part didn't change. And what did that create? Well, a mismatch, because at one point, the Minneapolis Lakers, in a sense, the name Lakers was motivated. It made sense. Change the locale, change the first part, and all of a sudden you have a name that is just a name that doesn't have any particular motivation behind it. You might say, well, it doesn't really need any motivation. It's just a name. And actually, the LA Lakers have been the LA Lakers for 50 years or so. I don't remember exactly when they moved. In the case of the Anderson Classroom Building, you could see a motivation for the correcting, as it were, the sort of bringing the system back into balance. And the same holds for the Houston Oilers. Houston and oil makes sense. Houston is the center or one part of Texas, a big part of the Texas oil industry. Moved to Tennessee. And for the first couple of years, they were the Tennessee Oilers. And what happened? What is the Tennessee team now? This is National Football League.
Titans.
Tennessee Titans, right. Now, does Titans have anything to do with Tennessee? Well, no, but Oilers has nothing to do with Tennessee. So it's the corrective aspect of the system here is giving you something that at least is not unmotivated in some sense. And the New Orleans Jazz becoming the Utah Jazz. Again, there was motivation because jazz or New Orleans is the birthplace of jazz, or birthplace of the blues, or whatever. And Utah does not have that same sort of set of associations. But in this case, the name has remained. It's interesting that someone felt the need to change the Oilers name away from Oilers, and I don't know why. The same didn't happen with Jazz or the Lakers, but we will see that not every possible change, or not every change that might make sense, does take place. And that in itself is interesting. When I had up on the board about continuity and change, part of what we'll do in this class is to try to figure out what does not change over time. That's almost as interesting as looking at what does change. Most of the action in historical linguistics focuses on what changes, but what remains the same is interesting in its own right. Why did it stay the same? Why has Lakers persisted as Lakers, even though it's unmotivated? If you think of the relationship between a team name and the place, should make some sense, but if you buy into that notion, then all of a sudden you have a mismatch, but you don't do anything about it. The team that started this whole thing of moving around was the Brooklyn Dodgers. And what did they become? This is an obvious answer, but this is baseball now. The baseball fans out there? Oh my God, I can't believe it. They became the Los Angeles Dodgers. Have you at least heard of Los Angeles Dodgers? Yes? No? They are the Major League Baseball team in Los Angeles. Maybe this won't work, but why were they called Dodgers? You might say, well, it looks like neither name really has any motivation to it, but anyone know why the Brooklyn Dodgers were called the Dodgers? Because in the olden days in Brooklyn, there were streetcars, and the pedestrians were known to have to dodge around the streetcars, because the streetcars come rolling down, and you have to do something about them. And so there came to be this notion that the Brooklynites were skilled at dodging their way across the streets. So the team became known as the Brooklyn Dodgers. Not much of a motivation, you might say. So when they moved to LA, it became the Los Angeles Dodgers. Maybe you still have to dodge traffic in LA, or maybe if you think those names need to make sense, or if Brooklyn Dodgers didn't make any sense, wasn't motivated in the first place, then LA Dodgers would be no less motivated than that. So it's interesting to look at these things, and again, we're looking at it from the point of view of continuity and change, and how change can disrupt a system, and how a system sort of reacts to that. Okay, I'm going to tell you more about buildings on campus. This is not an architectural class, but the buildings on campus give us actually a number of sort of points of entry to the content of this class. And it was great when I actually taught in a class. When I taught in Anderson classroom building, I was able to say, look, we're right here in this very building. But there's another one on campus. I won't show you a picture, but I'll simply write it up on the board here. I hope you all come away from this realizing that there is a connection between talking about these buildings and talking about language change. If this is not what you thought you were getting yourself in for originally when you signed up for this class, too bad, because this is how I do it. So there's another building on campus, Mendenhall Labs. Does anyone know where it is? What it is? It's across the Oval. It's on the south side of the Oval, one up from Haggerty. So has anyone ever had a class in that? You have? Okay, good. I'll come back to you in a moment on that. But I want to tell you two things about Mendenhall Labs that are interesting from the point of view of this class. When I was teaching the lower level historical linguistics class, have any of you taken that? The 3000 level? Just as a digression, what is the number for that class now? Do you remember?
3901.
3901. This numbering has its own diachrony for this class. When I first taught this class 37 years ago, I've been at OSU for 37 years, it was Linguistics 285. And it changed at one point the 200 level classes were the sort of, not the lowest level, but not very high. And we thought, well, we want to aim for we want to make it appear to be a little more rigorous. So we upped it to 385. And that was fine for a while. But then we got into, there was a historical linguist in another department who wanted to propose a course sort of like this. So we said, well, why don't we have a joint course cross-listed? That way it could go either way. OSU rules tell you that if you're going to cross-list something, the same number needs to be used in both departments. They already had 385 used for something else. So in order to cross-list it, it became 301. At one point we said, well, wait a minute, the class that you're taking now, this very class, 5901, was 611 in the olden days in the quarter system. We thought, well, wait a minute. Actually what happened is the guy who taught the course, it was in NELC, the Near Eastern Languages Department, he left, and so they had no one to teach it. We said, well, wait a minute, we should take this number back. And in taking it back, we changed it to 311. That kind of provided some rationale to the numbering system. If the higher level course was 611, the lower level course was 311, there's some sort of matching between the form, in the sense of the number, and the meaning attached to that number. But then semesterization hit OSU big time. Some of you have been here under the quarter system, if you go back 4 years or no. Are all of you semester babies, as it were? You had some quarter experience? Okay. Under the quarter system, 311 was fine, but under the semester system, they changed to a 4-digit numbering system. And we changed it to 3901, and the higher level course we made 5901. There's some sort of internal rationale within the linguistics department for labeling it as 9. That has to do with the area in which it occurred. But if you look at, so this course numbering has its own sort of interesting diachrony. I'll tell you finally about Mendenhall and Labs and 285. But let me just finish with this. What motivated these changes in each instance? Some of these changes were essentially mandated, were forced upon the system. So this one, changing it to a 4-digit system. This was, we might think of this as kind of the laws of universal grammar of numbering at OSU. We didn't have a choice. It was imposed on us. So the universal grammar of numbering, of course numbering. But some of these, and so also here, the change to 301 was dictated by OSU's rules about course numbering. So again, the universal grammar of course numbering. How about this change? Yeah.
Prestige.
Yeah, in a sense, prestige. It was an internally motivated change within the linguistics department. It wasn't mandated by anything. We just said, oh, this is something that we think would be good for the course, good for us, good for the linguistics department. So it was a kind of prestige. We wanted to upgrade it somewhat. So this has a sort of social motivation. And one final aspect here. Whoever's computer's doing that, could you turn off the...
I think it's the one up
Oh,
there.
it's that one then. How do I turn it off? What is it doing when it beeps at me like that?
Got an email.
Yeah, but, oh, I see. So how do I turn it off? I could just get out of email because I don't, no, I don't think I need it anymore, so. Thank you. I didn't know where it was coming from. I knew the noise, but I didn't know the source. Good, thank you. So this has a different kind of motivation. This was dictated by, as I said, sort of the universal grammar of course numbering. This was an internally motivated change with a social dimension to it, trying to upgrade our image. Another one that is sort of internal is this 9 that I mentioned here, because that was within the linguistics department. We decided to number the courses. The 5 gives you the level, that this is a high level course. The 9 sort of locates which area of linguistic, the linguistic field. It is. So that was a change that wasn't socially motivated, but was kind of motivated by the system, but within the sort of internal to the linguistics department system, as opposed to something imposed on us from outside. The metaphors that I'm using here, talking about universal grammar of course numbering, should make you realize that this is highly relevant to this course, because it shows us the kinds of motivations that can play a role in change. This isn't exactly language change, but in a sense it is, because we do talk about these courses in terms of, oh, what are you doing this course? I'm taking 5901 with that bozo Joseph or whatever. And so these numbers are part of our vocabulary even. So it's a very small part of language change, but it gives us a sense. What we'll see as we look at language change is that some of them are, some changes seem to be dictated by aspects that are universal to language. Some of them are highly particular to individual systems, like this one, and some are socially motivated with a different kind of external motivation from the universal grammar sort. Okay, so set that digression aside. Go back 35 years in time to Linguistics 285. I'm teaching it, and a student comes in, Marilyn Zangardi is her name. I think I probably am not allowed to mention her by name, but I very much appreciate what she did, as you will see, and so I think it's only fair to give her credit for it. She was a transfer student to OSU, and in the first day of class, she came to me and said something, she was late or whatever. I don't remember exactly what it was. She just wanted to sort of establish contact. And she said to me, I have a question for you, but I can't stay to talk. Maybe I could meet in your office hours, that's fine. She said, I need to get to a class in Mendon Hall. Oh no, in Mendon, she said. I need to go to a class in Mendon. I said, okay, fair enough. And she left. And I thought, okay, what did she do here, Mendon? What was she talking about? Well, clearly she was talking about Mendon Hall Labs, where she had a class. But what did she do in saying, oh, I've got a class over in Mendon? Anyone see what's going on, Nancy?
She sort of made like an analogy between this name and what she knows about other classroom buildings that sometimes end with hall.
Right, yeah, so there are lots of buildings that end in hall, like Oxley Hall, Haggerty Hall, and others. There's some that end in labs, like Smith Lab. But what she did is sort of forget about the labs part and take Mendon. And how did she come up with, you say analogy, and I like that. That's exactly what was going on. She analogized it. Analogy is really kind of likening between two different entities. We'll talk a lot about analogy, probably in about 6 weeks' time. But it's an important and very powerful force in language synchronically and diachronically. And she, so analogically, based on these models of Oxley Hall, Haggerty Hall, and others, what did she actually do, though, to come up with Mendon out of Mendon Hall? You're absolutely right, Nanny, that it's a matter of analogy. But what mechanism, what process went into her creating? Yeah. Phonology, like sounding? Well, it's phonology in a sense, because the what at one point was this sort of phonological representation of the name of the building becomes shortened to simply that. But what's in, and so the hall gets lopped off, you might say, right? So, but what was it that sort of allows hall to be lopped off?
It means something by itself.
It means something by itself. So how was she conceptualizing the name Mendon Hall as she heard it? Do you think? Yeah.
She assumed it was two different words.
Yes.
Saying Mendon Hall.
So she reanalyzed it, or analyzed it differently from what the conventional analysis was. Conventionally, Mendon Hall is not Mendon plus Hall. It's simply a guy's name, and he was a geologist of note, if I remember right. But so what she did is take Mendon Hall, the lab she didn't care about, and instead of treating it as a monomorphemic What do I mean by monomorphemic?
Only one unit of meaning?
Right, having only one unit of form that correlates with meaning. Right, so just a single morpheme there. Mendenhall is a long one, but it's unanalyzable, and she analyzed it. She imposed an analysis on it. She turned Mendenhall into, I'm kind of running out of space here, get rid of this. Into two units, two meaningful units, Menden and whatever that was, and Hall meaning a building of some sort. And so her analysis of Mendenhall was different from the conventional analysis that we had, other OSU users had, for which Mendenhall was just a monomorphemic. So what's involved here, yes, is analogy to things like Oxley Hall, Haggerty Hall, and so forth, but there's also what we could refer to as a reanalysis of the string of sounds Mendenhall that go with that. Now you might not think this is a big deal, but I was just jazzed, not Utah jazz, New Orleans jazz, when I heard this, because I thought, wow, this is historical linguistics, language change before my very eyes. And so Marilyn Zangardi, wherever you are, I thank you for this, because it was, and I use this example every year. Okay. More about buildings, more about Mendenhall. Oh, there's a name that we give to this kind of lopping off. It's sometimes referred to as clipping. In case you run into that. There's also kind of lopping off, and this is probably appropriate here, because in Mendenhall, Hall is the head of the phrase. It's what determines what the phrase is. Hall being some kind of noun, so Mendenhall, analyzed that way, is or just like Oxley Hall, is a hall of some sort. So Hall is the head. So this is lopping off of a word like Hall. The head is sometimes referred to as beheading. So clipping or beheading are terms that are used for this kind of process. But there's a lot more than, it isn't that you just randomly lop off some word. We see here that there's a reanalysis that in a sense allows for the lopping off, and also analogical pressures, analogy to things like Oxley Hall and so on. So all in this one little word that she said, there's tons of material of interest to historical linguistics. I mean, I've just spent 15 minutes on it, right? Okay. What about Mendenhall? So there were a couple of you who said you had classes in Mendenhall, right? What do you remember about the building? Anything in particular?
Much stood out.
Not too much? Okay.
It had rocks.
It had rocks in it, yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of samples.
Yes, rock samples, and if you look at the walls, it looks like geological strata. And that's very appropriate because the Department of Geology is housed in Mendenhall. So it's kind of cool to walk in there. It's an interesting building, doesn't it itself? The floors have interesting formations and everything and such. But what is interesting about it, about geology, from our point of view here in linguistics, actually, let me turn on the light. Here we go. Is a notion that came out of geological science and has been adopted and adapted for use in linguistics and in historical linguistics especially. And this is the notion of uniformitarianism. Has anyone run into this term before? It's a very important concept. In geology, it was associated with the geologist Charles Lyell. And he was looking at rocks and things, and out in the field at the sides of mountains, and looking at strata of different layers of geological formation and so forth, trying to figure out how they got to be that way. So he was interested in the diachrony of these synchronic geological formations that he was looking at. And he knew something about what happens synchronically. He knew, about land masses moving and earthquakes and eruptions and volcanoes and so forth. And he said, well, maybe I can use what I know about the present and about geological developments in present day, and I can use those to try to make sense of what happened some large number of years ago, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, whatever. So he said, I can look to the present as a guide to what happened in the past. And he was essentially saying that the processes that are observable today we can think of them as being uniform across all time, and therefore you can use them. You can project back and say, okay, this is what I understand is going on now. Does that give me any insight? Does that give me any way of figuring out what was going on 2 million, 10 million, 100 million years ago? So that's where the uniform part of uniformitarian comes in. He's assuming that the processes are uniform across all time. And if these are processes that have to do with sort of what scientists refer to as, some scientists refer to as natural laws, those are laws that should be governing things anytime, in the present, in the past, whatever. If they are the natural laws. There are physicists, I understand, I'm not a physicist, but who say that in the nanoseconds of the burst that referred to as the Big Bang that led ultimately to the creation of the universe, in that particular view of things, there are some who claim that natural laws only came into being some point afterwards, some nanoseconds or milliseconds afterwards. And there was a period of time where the natural laws as we know them today didn't hold. But the snap of a finger is basically the nanoseconds ticking by, and so past that Big Bang, we have natural laws. And what I else said was these natural laws, if they're valid across all time, then I can use what I observe in the present to make sense of the past. And this has been on the link. So this is on the geological side. And this has been taken up with great fervor and with great success by William Labov on the linguistic side, such that most linguists talk about Labov's uniformitarian principle, when in fact it's Lyell's uniformitarian principle transported into linguistics. So the uniformitarian principle says basically that the processes and mechanisms that we observe in the present are valid basically for explaining the past. There are lots of different formulations of this. This is just one kind of rough and ready formulation. The textbook will give you others. But the idea is the same, that what goes on in the present can be a guide to understanding the past. Now, it's not that everything in the past must have been exactly like we know it in the present. We know that there are certain natural phenomena that we observe and we can understand, like eruptions of volcanoes, that took place in the past, but with an entirely different degree of intensity and magnitude. So if you go to Yellowstone Park, anyone been there out west? Okay, a few people. It's marvelous. It's one of our national parks, one of our national treasures. There are geologists have figured out that there are layers of volcanic or the residue of volcanic activity below the ground there, and if you the amount of material that must have spewed forth in these volcanic eruptions is several orders of magnitude greater than any known observed volcanic eruption. But does that counter the idea of uniformitarianism? No, because the same natural laws that allow a volcano to do this much eruption. If you have the right combination of stuff and heat and movement and all the things that go into a volcano, you could have that much more. It's not counter to natural laws, it's just a different magnitude. So it need not be the case that everything, or that only what you observe in the present was available in the past. But the same general principles and guidelines that govern what's going on today can be used in the past. They can be applied, or they can be realized in somewhat different ways, but as long as the same processes and mechanisms are involved, then we have uniformitarianism. And this assumption, this principle of uniformitarianism, really gives us a basis for understanding language change simply by observing what's going on. We hear Marilyn Zangardi say Menden. We say, okay, we figure out that it's analogy, it's clipping, it's reanalysis, and so forth. We say, okay, those processes, we just witnessed them. And we can use them then to say, well, what's going on in the past? Do we see analogy in the past? Yes, you'll see examples of it. Do we see clipping in the past? Yes, we see examples of it. And so forth. So the same principles. Okay. So I'm going to, it's getting warm in here, so I'm going to take off my shirt, bare my chest, not really, just only go so far. I have this t-shirt on underneath. And can anyone, you all see it here? Does anyone know what this t-shirt is about? Maybe I should. We don't have a, what do they call, runway for me to go down and style it for you, but you get the idea. It's, anyone know what language it is?
Basque.
Basque, yes, good. This is Basque. And these are Basque words. And these are the Basque words, and these are the symbols that are supposed to give you an idea of the meaning. Can anyone figure out what maitasuna means? That's this one here.
Love.
Love, yes. There's a heart and people getting together and so forth. So this is, but there's some that you can understand even if you don't understand the picture. So this is folkloria. What do you imagine folkloria is in Basque? Folklore, yeah, good. So see how easy Basque is? So what relevance does this t-shirt have for historical linguistics? Why am I modeling it for you? Yeah?
Isn't Basque really weird in the sense that it doesn't relate to any language?
Yeah, Basque is one of these tough nuts to crack in terms of linguistic relations. Linguistic, or what we might actually better call genetic, or even better, genealogical relations. And if you, this is an old version of the book, but one of the books that I'm asking you to read is one that I had a hand in writing along with Hans Henrik Hock. But look at the title, Language History. Well, we've been doing a little bit of language history. Language Change, already we've been talking about language change. And Language Relationship, that's the title of this book. And these are the three key areas that that historical linguists worry about. And Basque is an interesting challenge because it is not obviously related to any language known to humans around the world. It's not that people don't think that there might be some connections, but there's none that you can really nail down and say, yes, I've definitively shown that Basque is related to Sumerian. That's a favorite one. Or that Basque is related to some language in the Caucasus, another favorite one. So, so the relationship aspect of Basque is interesting. Not the love relationships, but the linguistic relationships. And what's interesting about folkloria, or what do you imagine artea is, this one? Art, yes. What's interesting about folkloria and artea? Why was it easy to know what they meant? Because they're, well, yes, we could call them cognates. We might want to refine that, ultimately we'll want to refine that term. But what do you imagine the history of the word folkloria in Basque is? Yeah?
Those are just borrowed?
Yes, it looks like it's a word that has come into Basque from outside of Basque. Where a word like maitasuna for love, which doesn't seem to have any obvious connection to any other words in languages around it or whatever, is probably a native Basque word, an indigenous Basque word. And folkloria, artea, are imports into the language. So folkloria as a borrowing. And that gives us a little insight into one of the ways in which languages can change. They can change by contact with speakers of other languages and by absorbing stuff, material, linguistic material from those other languages. And one very sort of large area of study in that overlaps with historical linguistics is what we could call contact linguistics, namely the linguistics of contact between speakers of different languages. We teach a whole course on language contact. We'll spend a little bit of time on it here because it's relevant to language change. One of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways in which languages change is speakers of one language absorbing material from speakers of another language. And it's interesting to see what kind of material can be absorbed, what kind of material how that material is altered when it's brought into the language and so on. So the AI at the end of, I believe, is a definite article marking, which is, so folklore is the word, and the at the end, AI at the end, is a Basque, is sort of Basquicizing the word, if you will. Okay. So by way of kind of giving you a change of pace, I am going to give you a little handout to read, and I'll give you 5 minutes or so to talk about it, or to read it, and then we will talk a bit about it. Okay, everyone had a chance to read through it, think about it? So, what does this have to do with historical linguistics? This little piece. Why should Kathleen Parker's pet peeves about language make any difference at all for our understanding of language change? Any thoughts, anyone? Yeah.
She doesn't like language change.
She doesn't like language change, right? So what specifically is she commenting on? What changes is she commenting on? First one? Yeah.
Word usage.
Word usage. So hot for attractive or fascinating. What else? So there's a lexical issue. Hot. What else? Yeah.
Intonation.
Intonation. So a prosodic issue. With the what's called uptalk. And I share her sensibilities that it sounds like people are asking questions, but I'm open to the fact, or my understanding of what goes on with language allows me to say, okay, well, I have to adjust. This is how this person speaks. They're not asking a question. They're making a statement. And how about the third one? Her last nit pick. No problem. As the customary reply to thank you. What is she doing with that? Why does she object to it? It's a lexical issue, but there's a little more to it than that. Yeah.
Does it also have to do with like pragmatics, like the social component?
Okay. So she's sort of failing to understand that this is simply part of a social interaction, and in a sense, like we were saying with. We don't want that on the screen, but we do want to scroll down to. No problem. It's part. Is it? What is the meaning of no problem? I guess that's really the issue. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Like, it's not a bother to me.
Okay. Yeah. What is in the transactions in which she's commenting on? What is the meaning of no problem?
Or you're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome, basically. It means you're welcome. It's simply a new way of saying you're welcome. But this is kind of a semantic issue. Lexical, yes, but semantic. Yeah, someone else had their hand up. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what you're welcome means. I think no problem makes so much more sense.
Okay, so we can maybe think of it in terms of the system. You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome for what? You're welcome to what? Enter my space. You're welcome to have intruded upon me and ask me to do things for you, and I do them gladly and so forth. Yeah, it's not transparently. The pieces are not transparently related to the meaning it's trying to convey. Just like CC as the abbreviation for Anderson doesn't really match up. The meaning of EC is not motivated by the meaning of the association with Anderson. So the meaning of you're welcome is really, it emerges out of the pragmatics of this interaction between people. And no problem seems to have greater motivation because you're saying, it has been no problem for me to serve you. I gladly serve at your will or whatever. And so in a sense, where the system is kind of correcting itself. You might think of it that way. So why is she objecting? What is she doing with no problem? What meaning does no problem have for her? Does it mean you're welcome for her? No. It means she's interpreting it in its literal sense. There is no problem here. Okay, but I just did something for you and you thank me for it. I'm telling you that there's no problem here. Why should there be a problem? You just did something for me. So she's really etymologizing the word. She's the phrase. She's giving it its etymology as, what is the sign for no? It's this, right? We're doing this in logical terms. That there's an entity problem and there's no such thing. I have that right? Backwards out. It goes like that.
No, I think otherwise.
Like that?
No,
Tell you what.
the only other corner
The
there
only
is,
other- Which one?
like, a top right-hand corner.
Here,
Yeah.
over,
Like top right, yeah,
and down.
yeah.
Yes. Okay, no problem. I did it. Thank you. Not a logician. So she etymologized it into no problem. And what do we mean by etymology here? When I say she etymologized it. What is this word etymology? Have you ever run into it? Yeah.
Since it's not as common a word, maybe I'll say etymon means something that's true.
Right. So this is etymology derives from the Greek word that means true, and it's really the study of the true meaning. Literally, so true meaning plus a study. So it's the study of the true meaning of a word, etymologically speaking. But is the meaning of a word something that's constant throughout its entire history, its entire diachrony? No, and we have evidence of it right here before our very eyes with speakers who use no problem, not in its etymological sense, but simply as a conventional response equivalent to this otherwise or similarly meaningless conventional response of you're welcome. So etymology is essentially saying the true meaning is the original meaning. If you adopt it, that's really the view that she's taking here. She's not allowing for change in the semantics. Does that make sense? Do you see what's relevant about this? Do you understand what I'm saying when I talk about etymologizing? Because we will see that a lot of what we do in this class ultimately boils down to etymology. We can only understand the development of a word if we can figure out how it came into being in the first place. And if we say, well, part of its coming into being is giving it a meaning, fair enough. But is the meaning always constant over time? I mean, think of our building example with Anderson. There, the meaning was the same. It's this building, that we can define in so many cubic feet and all this, so much concrete and whatnot and so forth. That defines the building. So in a sense, that has stayed the same, but the form changes. Well, the meaning part can change as well. We can think of, this is a diagram that gives us the so-called linguistic sign. This is drawing on Ferdinand de Saussure, the great 19th century linguist. We'll talk about him here from time to time. And he emphasized that the linguistic sign consisted of a an element of form and an element of meaning, and a relationship between form and meaning that defines the linguistic sign. He talked about them in somewhat more grandiose terms. Form for him was the signons in Latin, and the meaning was the signatum, using the Latin term. So that which signals and that which has been signaled. Some people use the French terms signifiant and signifié, but we can just talk about them in English as form and meaning. And together, these define the linguistic sign. And in principle, anything can change here. The form can change, the meaning can change, and even the relationship between the form and meaning can be altered in certain respects. And so and a lot of this harks back to etymology as the starting point, because that tells us what the form and meaning and relationship between form and meaning were in the first place. And from that point, we can say, all right, we can figure out what's going on diachronically. So she was in a sense imposing a synchronic etymology on no problem. I know what no problem means. It means no and problem. Put it together, it means there is no problem. It does not mean you're welcome for her. She was giving it a synchronic etymology, but it was also one that mirrors its diachronic etymology. Surely no problem at one point had the meaning of no, negating the fact that there is a problem, which came into English from French, but from Latin and ultimately from Greek. So etymology actually will turn out to be very, very critical for what we do here. And sometimes we'll simply assume an etymology. I will tell you this word meant such and such, and then we see what happens to it. But sometimes we're going to have to work at actually figuring out what the etymology is. And it's a very, turns out to be a very complicated but very interesting procedure or process and outcome. One of my heroes in historical linguistics, Eric Hamp, and I'll refer to him from time to time. I'll tell you about personalities in the field, the people who are important, not just important to me, shaping my personal diachrony, if you will, that has gotten me to this synchronic point. And I think it's relevant for you to know what went into my training so that you can see what aspects of my training then get absorbed into your training. There's a sort of continuity through that with some change. So that we can really talk about diachrony and synchrony for almost any human institution or YL, non-human institution, geological, and so forth. Really anything in the universe is fair game for being viewed diachronically through time, synchronically at some particular point in time. So Eric Hamp said about etymology that it's the most brittle of the linguistic sciences, because it turns out that sometimes their etymologies just look dynamite. They've got to be right, and then someone says, well, wait a minute, there's one little detail that doesn't work there, and that sort of shoots the whole ballgame, as it were. Okay, we have 10 minutes. This is good. I will now turn to sort of more mechanical kinds of stuff. Let me give you a syllabus. I could probably pass them back from the beginning, but this gives you a chance to walk around a bit. I appreciate Need one more, sorry. All right. So this is the syllabus. I'll put it up on the screen. See it there. Syllabus, there it is. So the first part of the syllabus gives you just mechanical stuff about me and where you can find me. My office hours will be just Tuesday, 12:45 to 2:15. I'm around a lot and available a lot, so you can, if you need to talk to me and it doesn't, and that office hour time doesn't work, you can make an appointment, which is actually my preferred way of doing this. My office is 113C Stadium East. The department has been moved to the Ohio Stadium. I don't know the abbreviation for Ohio Stadium, actually. I should check that out. I also have an office in Haggerty, but and I could meet you there if needed, but my primary office is over in the linguistics department of the stadium. It's the farthest away from the main office of linguistics that you can be and still be within the linguistics department. It is at the very edge, the periphery, the margins of the department. I didn't take it personally when they banished me out to Siberia like that. So we meet twice a week. I like to use all 80 minutes as effectively as possible. There will not be a break. If you need a break, you just politely excuse yourself. But we're here for 80 minutes. I think we could sit. You could sit and listen, and I can certainly talk for 80 minutes without any problem. I will try to end promptly. There's a clock there that I will be able to be very mindful of. I have set an alarm on my phone, so it'll let me know when we have 5 minutes to go. So I'll try to end promptly as well, so you can move on to your next gig. I'll be out of town for 1 week, the week of February 15th to the 19th. I've arranged for 2 advanced graduate students, one in English, one in linguistics, to talk about history of their particular languages. So we'll have a lecture on that week on Tuesday about the history of English, and on Thursday about the history of Yiddish. So I'll tell you more about that. And there'll be, you're supposed to come to class. There's going to be an assignment based on that, based on sitting and listening to them. So I expect you to come. We'll also have an exam, a regular class session during the final exam. I think that's the right time, Monday, May 2nd, 10 to 11:45. The class will end or the course will end with a collaborative in-class exercise that substitutes for, or is, the final exam. It's fun, and I want you to have fun at it. So it's technically a final exam, but it really isn't a final exam. There's no preparation for it. You simply come, and everything that you've learned throughout the semester will allow you to work in small groups on this particular project. Taping of the class we've talked about. I hope it's okay. As I said, I don't know if it isn't okay. I'm not sure what we're going to do. There's a course website, not really a website, but Carmen offers an electronic presence for the course. I will use it. I will put all the handouts in class will be on Carmen in the content area. So if you lose them, whatever, you have access to them. If you're not here one day and there was a homework assignment, the homework assignment will be posted on Carmen, and you can get at it that way. So you should check the Carmen site regularly. I also will interact with you by email. I know that that's not necessarily the most. Email is, even though it's, from my vantage point, a marvelous invention that came onto the scene in the late 1980s. I know for some younger students, or students in the younger generation, email is sort of passé. It's only official stuff, and you have Facebook messages and Snapchat and whatnot. I don't do that. I am on Facebook, but I don't really send Facebook messages much. What I like to do is send email. So check your email, please. Don't let it sit for a week, because there might be something important in there. Attendance is crucial in this class. I'm vain enough to think that what I talk about in the class is important and different from anything that you get from reading the textbooks alone. So I think of it as value added enrichment, if you will, and therefore it's very important. I do not simply teach from the textbook. I expect you to read the textbooks, read the material in the books, but I don't say, okay, what happened on page 413, or let's turn now to page 63 and see what he said. So I have my own agenda, and actually, even though I was involved in writing one of those books, I would have organized it completely differently, but Hans Henrich was the lead author, the senior author, and this was, so we do it differently. So, I expect you therefore to come to class on a regular basis. I know that in the winter especially, stuff happens, and there's snow and cars slide off the road and buses are late and people get sick and so forth. So I understand that, but I expect you to come to class as much as you can. And I am actually going to take attendance and count attendance as over the whole course as if it were a homework assignment. So you can get a high score or low score on your attendance. Textbooks, I have just old copies of them. I couldn't find the new ones. But there's a sort of lower level book. That's this one that Hans Henrich and I did, and then a more upper level one. Some people say there's a lot of overlap between them, but they come at the topics from somewhat different perspectives with different assumptions. This is for people who are thoroughly attuned to linguistics. This is for graduate students in linguistics. This was written, our idea was that it's for anyone, even people who don't know anything about linguistics. So I think that when, in cases where the topics overlap, it might be good to read this first to see sort of what's going on, and then there'll be class discussion, and then to read this one to see so what there is that's of greater interest. There are second editions of each of these. I don't. Have any of you gotten the books yet? Yeah. So I think they're different covers, but and some difference in content. Actually, if you get the older, the first editions of each of these, it would basically give you the same material. There's some differences, but nothing seriously crucial about that. So readings, there will be a set of articles from journals that I'll have you read as well, but we don't get to those for a little while. Those will be posted, or links to them will be given on Carmen. There will be a number of homework assignments. I'd like you to learn about historical linguistics by doing historical linguistics. We have this class for 3 more minutes. Yeah. I like to use every minute. We're not going to let them push me out. So homework assignments are really going to be the meat of discussion for our class sessions. There will also be 2 problem sets, which are kind of like homework assignments on steroids that you are to do that are sort of a bigger deal. They're kind of like midterms, but not exactly. I want you to do the homework. I give you 6 points out of 10 if you simply turn in the homework, and then you can get 4 quality points above that. Since we're almost out of time, I will ask you to read over the syllabus. I'm going to give you a homework assignment for Thursday. And spend no more than an hour on it, I think is fair. And I want to draw your attention also to the note after week 1 that this weekend there's a linguistics department symposium, mathematical computational modeling and tools in and for historical linguistics, starting Friday afternoon and continuing all day Saturday. There's a lot of interesting stuff about computational methodologies as applied to historical linguistics in that day and a half. And you're all welcome to come. So have a look at the program. Let me give you your homework assignment, and I will excuse you then. Looks I'm right on time, I think.